Snehal Contractor is the Vice President of Worldwide Systems Engineering and Technical Services at Stellar Cyber. He's an engineering professional with over 30 years of experience in technical sales, marketing, and management, and he's worked for startup companies including NetScreen, Palo Alto Networks, Riverbed Fortinet, and a variety of others. Snehal, thank you for joining us and for having the panelists introduce themselves.
Hey, welcome everyone. We're very excited about today's event. Thank you for taking the time to join the webinar. We have seasoned experts from the industry to address some very hot topics in security today. As Dan mentioned, the main topic will be ransomware. We met earlier as a team to build some discussions that will help organizations and help you in your career. We're going to wow you with insights around cybersecurity. Thank you, Camp IT, for organizing this. Let me start with introducing our panelists here. We have Shahir, Troy, and Jim. Troy, if you can please start by giving yourself a couple-minute introduction about yourself and your experience, please.
Absolutely, Snehal. Thank you so much. And thank you, Dan, for having us on today. Troy Wilkinson, I'm the current global head of cybersecurity research and analytics for Interpublic Group, former CISO at International Cruise and Excursions, as well as Social Wealth, an e-health company. Been in the industry for over 20 plus years with the State Department, and before that with law enforcement doing IT forensics. So I've got to work on both sides of the bench when it comes to being a consumer of the goods, as well as a vendor selling the goods, as well as being an investigator and a detective running this stuff down across the world. And it has taught me a lot of things, but number one is that the threat's not going away. The threat is growing, and with the rise of cryptocurrency and the ability of bad guys to get paid for their work, we are seeing a tremendous increase in what we're going to talk about today in ransomware, as well as other ways of monetizing cyber threats. And so I look forward to a robust discussion and talking about where we go from here.
Great. Thank you very much, Troy. It's quite a bit of experience. Shahir, next.
Good morning, everyone. Shahid Shah, Senior Business Security Officer in ADP. I've been with ADP for close to 8 years now, but prior to that, I've been a consultant. I had my own consulting, helping other companies set up their SecOps, as well as their security, helping to solve their security challenges. I started my career as a developer, moved in as an architect, and as an architect, obviously, security is one of the prime focuses. And I got so excited with all the research and everything that I decided to make it my main job. I just couldn't stop. It's my nature to solve problems, and security seemed like a really good, interesting area that I thoroughly enjoyed. So made it my career, or decided to make it my career. Over the years, I've, as I said, moved from consulting, and more recently with ADP, helping to bring the risk-based awareness to the business, at the same time helping the security teams sell cybersecurity with the business and make those business-informed risk-based decisions with the business. That has been off late my focus.
Thank you, Shahir. Jim?
Sure. Like other panelists, I'm a multi-decade InfoSec guy. The season comes with the hair color, but also with the job, I think, or the hair color comes with the job and the stress of the job.
Yes.
Unlike some of the others, most of my security career has been focused around financial institutions, Merrill Lynch, Bank of America, WorldPay, Intuit for a bit. And now I'm with an organization or a company called Asurion. You may or may not know us. If you do, that means you likely broke the screen on your phone or dropped your phone in the water, and we've repaired and replaced it for you. Our organization is actually a lot bigger than most people think. We're 22,000 people over 24 countries worldwide. We deal with most of the carriers all around the world, most of the big carriers. I own all of security, which is not just the cybersecurity, but also physical security, business continuity, safety. So we've got a very large realm of responsibility around protecting the assets and the people of our organization. I will say a little bit about myself. I'm born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio. I am
my neighbor.
I'm a veteran fan of the Cleveland Browns, which I used to say the Browns and security were the same. I'm a sucker for a lost cause. But apparently this past season, there must be snowing in hell or something like that, because they did pretty well. So
They sure did. I was rooting for them.
yeah. One of the things, and I hope we get a chance to talk about it, is you said something very key, which was the having a security job, right? This is a thing that probably won't go away anytime soon. And boy, oh boy, it's like an arms race, right? The more you can monetize the internet, the more people are going to come and try and get easy money, which means more defense and the more intricate and complex problems we're going to have to solve. So I agree with you.
Yeah, great. Great. So let's get started. Just going to put some questions up for reference. This is a pretty open discussion. It'll help us lead to some of the stuff, right? So our main topic today is ransomware. It's a very complex attack, as we know. There are many thoughts of it's gonna happen to us, right? What do we do about it? Some of the experiences we want to share. So the first question is, let's take a look at what we've learned from some of the recent threats. For example, SolarWinds. How has this affected the way we look at the tools we have in our network? We've got a lot of tools in our network. We recently had another firewall vendor go through something similar, right? So what has changed? It's not about when, it's about how, and how bad is it going to affect us, right? It is going to affect all of us. We all know that. Even us here at Stellar Cyber, it made us think quite a bit. We actually put together a team immediately just to make sure that we have visibility and something like this doesn't happen. It's so we're all thinking things differently. So Troy, what are your thoughts on this?
Sorry, I was on mute, but I think that this really has a lot of facets to it, and I hope we get to some of them. Number one is third-party risk management. When you look at your third parties in the enterprise, whether they're a customer or client that you have to connect to for reasons, or if they're a vendor that you're buying from, there's always that inherent third-party risk. And so doing your best research and due diligence around your vendors is important. And in some companies who are quite large, that can get exponentially harder with the number of vendors. But as we look back at the NotPetya attack in 2016, we saw a very similar supply chain attack on a tax accounting firm in the Ukraine, where they were able to slip into the update mechanism and put the ransomware loader into an update that went out to their clients. And so this is certainly not new with SolarWinds supply chain attack, but it definitely paints the picture that it can affect anybody anytime. And with the many fingers into VMware and into Microsoft and all of the things that we're running down now from all of the tokens that were compromised and Office 365 emails, this thing is just continuing to spread. And so as we look at our third parties, we have to do our due diligence. And I think it's just a start.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's like I mentioned, right? It's inevitable. It's gonna happen, and especially when you've got all of these different tools and all of these access points. I've recently read that, even like your thermostat, your smart refrigerator, people can get into any of those IoT devices. And once you're on, it's a lateral network. If you haven't planned your network properly, a lot of these networks are still lateral. It's so easy to move around once you break that perimeter. Shahir or Jim, thoughts?
I can take on. I think as with many of the breaches, I think patching and updating your systems on a regular cadence, and I can't emphasize enough, maintain the system hygiene, right? That's key.
Yes.
I think the second one that comes to my mind, and this works for all kinds of threats, take a hard look at defense in depth, right? Don't just, firewall is not security, right? That just gets you the info, but with advanced APTs and malware attacks on the rise, I think defense in depth threat modeling is really, really key. Some of the tactics and techniques that the hackers use, they may have new variants, but the controls that you need to put in place to limit it, in some cases to prevent it, are well known, right? So defense in depth is key.
Absolutely.
I think training and awareness. I think especially with phishing and executable payloads that you're going to gain, right, as attachments. Train your associates not to click on anything that looks suspicious, right? Have a process for them to report those and have it investigated, right? I think security awareness and training is very key. Back up your data, right? Even if you get hit with a breach or a ransomware specifically, having a robust backup and that meets your RTO requirements, is key, and that will save you some trouble, even if you get hit with the ransomware.
Yep, great. Yeah, absolutely. And we're actually going to talk about some of those topics a little bit later, about just protecting your perimeter, having tools internally. Also, how do you train your folks, right? How do you train folks in your company not to just randomly click on things? So, Jim, your thoughts on this?
I was going to say, training your folks, right? Now is when the beatings will commence. That probably negative reinforcement probably doesn't carry as much weight. My initial thought, and I'm going to take it a little bit higher level, is that first, these breaches tell us anything. It's a consistent evolution, right? We are now seeing these ransomware companies that used to be a smash and grab, get as much as they could, a few thousand, have evolved into, 8 figures, 10, $20 million a shot.
Yes.
They're they're moving away from sort of the smash and grab to the advanced persistent threat, right? They're getting in there for months, doing as much recon and
absolutely
volume as they can get, so they can get the most money out of it. The second thing I think what we learned is that ransomware is a business, and there's an odd sort of trust component to it, which is these ransomware operators, they have to engender trust in you that they will give you the key to unlock your data. You also have to trust that if you don't, they will destroy it and release it, right? So there's a business evolution that is occurring here. It's going to be really interesting to see what the next year brings. The recent knockdown of the NetWalker ransomware is going to bring an interesting to see what sort of sprouts from that. And then going with what you said, it's not if, it's when. We're all going to get hit eventually, right? They're going to find a way in. There's just too many porous points. But it's how you respond. Between 5 and 20% of your people are going to click a phishing message. It's just what's going to happen.
Yes.
But how fast does it take the ones that you've taught well to get it to your security team so they can respond and they can contain the damage, right? Because if you can block that TLD or block that domain or whatever it is, or that execution, that could be the difference between a $5 million payout and just a nuisance. And that's really where I think a lot of that focus has to be.
Yeah, and Jim, that's a great point. Your point about how fast can you react. Do you have tools in your network that can react on behalf of you, right? Or are we going to rely on maybe even a third-party MSSP to react on behalf of us? So we'll talk about some of that stuff. But your point on, and I always bring this thoughts up with a lot of folks, is back in the day, we've all actually already aged ourselves, right? Back into the day, about 25, 30 years ago, hackers wanted to be known. Hey, look what I did. Look at me. I did this. It has changed completely at this point today. Nobody wants to know, right? It's all about targeted attacks. It's not about, let me just throw this out there and let me see, how many people I can rattle. You're right. It is targeted attacks now. They are coming after you. So you have to have tools that are going to protect you. Learn and look at this anomalous zero-day behavior. So
you saw at the end of the year last year, the Tesla Russian foreign nationals showed up to bribe with $500,000 to get a guy to put ransomware into Tesla.
Wow.
And that is an evolution because it's a $10-20 million payout.
Yes.
Of
yes.
course, some guy's going to risk flying out here to do that.
Yeah, it is a business, that is for sure. So, Shahir, you talked about this a little bit. I want to get some thoughts from Troy and Jim. Is, historically, we've prevented threats at the perimeter with a firewall. I started my career in firewalls, and we always thought protect at the perimeter. If they can't get in, we're all protected, right? But back then, you didn't have cloud applications. You didn't have guys coming in with, phones and laptops and PDAs and things like that. Today, we have to move to a containment and response strategy, as well as automated response. How do you sleep well, right? I want to know that I'm protected to the best of my knowledge. Troy, and then Jim.
Yeah, thanks, Snehal. And you're exactly right. We basically live in a world where we're becoming more connected by the day. We have smart devices that we wear and in our cars, in our homes. And with COVID, it really highlighted that with the work from anywhere model.
Yes.
So basically we treat all employees like they are working at Starbucks, and we secure them in that same fashion.
That's great.
I started my career as well in firewalls. My first vendor job was at a firewall company. And so it's the old, you have a castle and a moat, and the firewall keeps the bad guys out and they're not coming in. Well, that model has just turned on its head, where now that doesn't exist anymore. And people that still, plan their budgets according to that are setting themselves up for failure. Yeah. But I really think that looking for that lateral movement, and somebody mentioned it earlier, just assume that the bad guys are already in. 5 to 20%, as Jim mentioned, have clicked on a phishing email. There's something on their endpoint. You really want to look for that lateral movement, and you have to have those tools to find it. One of the things that I love, and even in my title, is data science, using our log aggregation and tools to look for those indicators of compromise and find things faster so that we can contain it before it gets out of control. And even if ransomware does land on an endpoint and it does encrypt and it tries to move laterally, you're going to see it when it tries to move. You might lose the endpoint, but you win the war, so to speak.
Okay. So when you talk about data science, is that looking for anomalies, looking for things that have never been seen before based on a baseline or a pattern that we've built?
Absolutely. And I think that most vendors today, if you look at Palo Alto and some of the larger companies, they have intrinsic correlation searches that come with their technology. So, that's not exactly what I mean. I'm talking about bringing your data into a centralized point that you can look across the silos for things that you may not put together, that may not stand out on their own. But when you combine a click to a malicious link that ends up with a encoded PowerShell that runs, that then ends with a registry change, these things by themselves would not trigger any alarms, but put together in a short window means a lot. And so those are the kind of things where we have to, use our data to tell us more about what's going on.
Yeah, Troy, that's actually, it's just funny. That's actually a demo that I focus on quite a bit. Is when you look at one data point in your company, let's say someone logged into a server and they successfully logged in. Great. That's not something maybe you're looking for. Maybe they logged in at an anomalous time. Maybe they logged in at 2 a.m. Maybe that doesn't still ring a bell, right? But now you piece it together of they actually, started maybe doing a port scan, and maybe they started accessing a server that's never been accessed before. So you have to holistically look at all of the data and have the different places that I have these detectors to pick things up. And now you can put it all together and say, this is a real threat, right? It's not, hey, this one tool told me, yeah, this a guy logged in, so what? This other tool told me logged into Active Directory and did a couple of things, might be okay. But when you start piecing it all together and drawing it and correlating all of those different events is when you start picking that guy out, right? Is, hey, this is a threat in my network. And what do these really sophisticated guys do? They will get into your network, and you may not notice it. They'll sit dormant for many days, many weeks, many times, just learning. That's not suspicious activity. Then they'll go do something. That's not suspicious activity. And you put it all together. Wait a minute, something's going on in my network, right?
You're hitting on something there, which is Troy said this, and I'm going to put it, in a catchy catchphrase, which is, the identity is the new perimeter, right? It's all about your authorization, your authentication.
Yes.
And I think somebody popped a question there: what trends are you seeing, or what's the number one method that somebody is attempting to use ransomware? And it's all about the credential. I need a spot where I can get in, and then I can get other credentials, so I don't set a trend, so I don't set off the continued, a SIM that's looking for Troy doing two things. It goes Troy, and then it goes Shahir, right? And then it goes Jim. That credential is now the pivot point for everything. And I think as long as humans are the weak link, it'll be targeted. Absolutely.
And unfortunately, humans are the weak link, right? It's the social engineering for all of us. We've seen it over and over, is the weakest link. And that's what gets us all the time, right? This next thing, we kind of all of us have already touched on, right? Well, based on some of the threats, what is something that we've learned that we did not think of before, right? We just haven't thought of it before. Any last words on that? Thoughts about it?
I would say, start thinking about network sinkholes. It can be very effective when it comes to ransomwares, right? You don't want that traffic going back to the malware's command and control centers.
Yes.
You're literally controlling that traffic into a sinkhole. At the same time, it allows you to learn a lot about the malware itself, and you can take an effective action to contain it thoroughly and eliminate it.
Yeah, Shahir, that's a great point, is that identifying also the traffic leaving your network, right? Is that whole actions and exfiltration stage in the cybersecurity kill chain. It's one thing in the reconnaissance stage, someone knocking on the door, someone trying to brute force their way in, but it's important that you clearly identify that that the threat of someone knocking on the door versus the threat where the data is leaving. You got to identify the two and take actions on that data that's exfiltrating my network, right? Someone establishing a command and control channel.
There's a second point of that, which is, we've sort of seeded the battleground of the network, right? We still put our firewalls up and we still have our IDS. A lot of stuff's going to the cloud, and that becomes sort of problematic at points. It really comes down to that data asset, right? Which is, we've got to start treating data like it's like a bank treats cash, right? That there's transaction logs and there's safeguards, and you take control ownership, and it's positive control, not I copy to a spreadsheet and leave it on my hard drive, or put it up in OneDrive or Google Drive or whatever it is. I think that's the thing that I've learned, which is, how do you get people in your organization to treat the data assets of value as something of value, as opposed to like a medium they work in, like a sculptor works in clay. No, you're working in cash here, pal. You're building something out of cash for this data. You got to treat it like that. That's a real difficult thing. It took me a while to learn it. It's a difficult awareness culture shift to create.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot of education and a lot of we've been used to doing things one way, and try to get people to change to do it in a different way. It's not that easy, right? So based on that, let's change this up a little bit. How much internal testing do we do? Let's take an example of the GoDaddy test. They sent out a phishing email. It just failed miserably, that campaign, and it really upset a lot of the employees, because GoDaddy sent out this phishing email, and 70-80% of the people clicked on it, and it exposed a major problem. I was at Palo Alto Networks for a long time, and we had a whole team that did this, and it was surprising. You would get close to 50% of the people, us being security specialists, to still click on it, right? I myself have, been a victim of it, almost a victim of it, being 20 years plus in security. I accidentally wire transferred some money over to someone in Italy because I rented a house on a what is that, Airbnb site. So it is easy to do. Now, what scares us, all of us, we're security experts, and it's easy for us to do that. Imagine the elders, right? Our parents. They get these calls constantly over the phone. Hey, you missed your taxes. Can you send a gift card from Walgreens? They fall for it, right? So what's the right balance in educating and sending these phishing campaign or to your internal employees? Any one of you three can just jump in and just talk about
that. I think once or twice a year actual campaign, but you also don't want to make it so frequent that employees get numb and they assume that it is just the company sending it out. It's nothing that we need to worry about, right? You don't want to create that situation either. I think you have to use a combination of techniques. One of them is actually testing it. The other one is use your internal portals or other avenues that you have to educate your employees about what to look for, right? How do you detect the suspicious message, right? Does it look too good to be true? Does it have some sense of urgency to it? Is it asking you to forcefully click on a link or run some executable, right?
Yes.
And I think look for some common grammatical errors and spelling mistakes too, right? I mean, these are very simple things that you can highlight with some examples, some animations and things like that to make it more interesting for your employees to think about these somewhat differently, right? And in some cases, it may be really, really planned and well thought of, but don't underestimate DKIM DMARC, right? Yes. Because one of the common ways they are going to get in is by making it look like a real message, and the domain may sound similar, but it's not. And your DKIM and DMARC controls can weed out quite a few of these getting in.
Yeah, great point. So you're saying this $500 gift card that's sitting in my email from Home Depot, I shouldn't click on that. It's just waiting there. Yeah, and the funny part is, how many of your friends and family forward you that? Hey, look, God. I got $50 from Home Depot. Register.
I do want to say that when it comes to enterprise and corporate phishing, the bad guys have gotten so much better than in the past with not only grammar, but just how they make them look and how the quality of the language. Obviously, it's an English speaking, a native English speaker that's writing them. So the attacks are getting so much better that they are hard to spot. And so, I think that Shahir is right when he says no more than quarterly. You don't want to overwhelm your employees. But what I do see a lot of companies do that I disagree with is the negative reinforcement. There are some companies that have a 3 times and you're fired rule. We do not do that. No. We love the positive reinforcement. Yep. Good job on finding it. We actually have a CISO challenge coin at IPG. And if you do something, above and beyond, if you spot something that is a real fish that may have led to a loss, then we reward those folks and we make it, we publicize that. So we want to positively reinforce that. As well as, just show them examples of if they failed, why they failed. Here's the highlighted things you might have seen. Maybe the URL was bad or this link didn't look right or something. But I also wanted to mention that it's not always links or attachments. We see a lot of threats that come in with a link and you click the link and it takes you to a malicious site or it's a bad attachment. But we see so many text only business email compromise emails. And a lot of times it's a third party that's been hacked, one of our vendors, one of our clients, or somebody else. And so they've gotten a lot of inside knowledge and they bring up an old thread that we've already talked on. So it looks like you're actually speaking to somebody that you've spoken to in the past, and it's only text. And it's tough for any mechanism to find that. And so it's just really an awareness campaign and positive reinforcement, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just to add to that, I think some of these are really some of these attackers have gotten so sophisticated that they are doing a campaign in the beginning from multiple different sources to know enough about a person, about a team and whatnot. And then they are specifically crafting a message, knowing that they're going to fall victim to it, right? So they are actually going into a planning stage before they actually execute it.
I have a good story around that. We had a former company, and I won't say which one, the general counsel, right? 25-year veteran of who's lying and why, right? As a lawyer, he got an email. It was from another law firm, and it was the opening negotiation in his divorce. He didn't know he was getting divorced, so he's quite surprised. He's clicking this link, this PDF like mad, and it's setting off my desktop, security guys like crazy. And I went in there to talk to him. It was up in the executive suite, and he swore at me, "Get the out of here." I said, "Whatever you think you're doing, it isn't real." And you could almost see the fog lift from his eyes as his cognitive brain took over. And he went, "What?" I said, "Somebody know enough to what would get you to click, right?"
Yep.
Along those lines, for us, we do the quarterly testing. We add a wrinkle to it. If you fail the test, we will, we give you mandatory training, right? You're supposed to go watch the CBT or something like that. And then you're scheduled again, right? You'll get it again before the next quarterly test. And if you pass it, like Troy said, we do some recognition, like, well done. We send to the manager, "Hey, this guy learned, this is a good employee," that sort of thing. So they feel good and get that positive reward, reinforcement reward.
Those are some great points. Jim, you're responsible for data security at Asurion. You also talked a little bit earlier about visibility, right? Hackers truly are taking advantage of the blind spots. That's what they're looking for, right? Yeah, it's much more complex environment that we're faced with, especially as CISOs and security analysts, right? It's the data's in the cloud. All of these remote users. What are your thoughts on that?
Hit the wrong button. I tried to hit unmute and I hit stop video. I think behind this, and the problem with all this is that it gets back to that data as a medium or as an asset as opposed to a medium. One of the things that we have done is business process mapping or data mapping in a business process, right? What are the 5 most important critical business processes? Well, it's when we take money, it's when we spend money, it's when we get inventory, that sort of thing. Where does that data go from birth to death, right? From the moment the customer creates a record all the way down, and where does it end? And who are the owners along those way? That allows us, because it's impossible to map every user's actions.
Yeah.
But if we can keep an eye on those assets and really stay focused on what's critical to the business, then that's generally where we tend to start and stay focused on. At least gives us a place to branch off from if we think something is awry.
Yeah. So Jim, when you talk about, that's a good point, keeping an eye on your critical assets. It's very hard to keep an eye on every single user. What are some of the things you do to keep an eye on a specific asset? Do you have tools in place that maybe you can write rules on that says, hey, watch this asset. Matter of fact, in the tool, tag this asset that this is a critical asset in my network. And if anything is anomalous with it, alert me or take some remediation actions immediately.
Yeah, we do quite a bit of that. The traditional data loss prevention stuff where you go, find me social security numbers, find me this, that, it's last year's or last century's best control, right? It still has its place, but it's no longer where you rest your trophy case. That's a terrible analogy, but you get what you're saying. What I'm saying is that it is all about, and I think Shahir was saying this earlier, it's all about behavior, right? Yeah. What did this person do, and when did you do it, and how is it anomalous, and what's the threshold? And that's the part that we really got to pay attention to, is what's the threshold for investigation. So often that something comes through and somebody goes, meh, right? We did a red team exercise not too long ago, and one of them actually said, oh, that's Frank. Frank's on the red team, so I'm going to ignore it. Wrong answer, right? Like, what if somebody compromised Frank's account? You got to go in there and do it. So I really do think it is about that top end correlation, the top end response.
Okay. So here or Troy?
I would just say user entity behavior analytics is important, and knowing what is good traffic versus bad traffic, right? Once you have baselined what a good traffic looks like, anything, you combine that with, UEBA, you get really good, obviously those alone won't prevent these from happening. You also have to make sure you have anti-malware, anti-malware tools on all your endpoints, whether it doesn't matter, your laptops, desktops, and all your servers that are all your servers, not just externally facing, right?
Correct.
So that is key. And I think one of the things that has worked great so far for us to limit ransomware is, I wouldn't name the vendor, but it's micro-virtualized sessions, right? So everything that you download from the internet, it gets opened up in a micro-virtualized environment.
Okay.
And as soon as you close the browser or close the app, it disappears, right? So that saved us from a lot of malware infection, right? So this is not about prevention. Somebody actually clicked on it.
Yeah.
And you're still able to control that situation.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Great.
And with data, I think data is the new oil, right? And Jim mentioned it earlier. Data is the real dollars that we're protecting, and it's more about, we've moved from protecting our perimeter to protecting the identity. And so, who is this person who's authenticating? Having visibility not just onto our assets. Chris Krebs yesterday on another conference said that most companies don't even do asset management well, don't know what's on their network, don't know what assets they have. But the next steps to that maturity model is understanding what identities you have on the network. Who has admin accounts? Who has service accounts? Are you using, these identities to access things they shouldn't? And then you have to track that accordingly with what data they should have access to, et cetera. Only then can you really find it. And if you really want to find a good network diagram for your company, just go search the dark web. Seems like the hackers have a better idea of what assets are on the victim's network than the victim does. Every consulting engagement I've gone into where someone's been hit with ransomware, the bad guys had a much better network map and asset map and data map than the customer themselves. So that's very interesting.
Yeah, for sure.
I would just say, add on to that, when you're designing your applications or your network, assume it is already compromised.
That's scary. That's scary. So I'm going to diverge a little bit. I saw a little squirrel walk by, so there was a buzzword that was going around for many years: cloud, cloud, cloud. Everything's about cloud. No one understands what the heck cloud is. Is it the cloud in the sky? Is it cloud? There was another buzzword that's been going around for a very long time, for the last few years, which is AI or machine learning. Jim, Shahir, Troy, all of you have brought up on baselining, understanding what a network looks like and what are the anomalies. When I'm standing at trade shows at a booth, many times people come up to me and say, explain to me what you do, but don't use the word AI or ML. But I still feel it's crucial to have machine learning part of your security posture. Right? It is to learn about the anomalous activity, because you just cannot have static detections and just live by static detections every day.
Absolutely. I think that it's become such a buzzword, and that really turns off a lot of consumers of the products, right? And every company, and I'll give you an example, right? After the SolarWinds hack, every single security company on the planet had something on their website about how they could have prevented it, or they could have helped you from it happening in the future. And we all understand that that's
ambulance chasers.
Tactic. Yeah, but we're all in the ambulance together. We're not ambulance chasers. We're all in the same ambulance headed to the hospital. But when it comes to this, sorry, I lost my train of thought there, but going back to the question, I'll divert to Jim for a minute. I'll collect my thoughts. I did have something here, but I want to come back to it.
You were headed down the AI and big data, hype, right? And as a matter of fact, I know if I walk into my C-suite and say, I need $1.2 million for an AI, I'll get the over the glasses look. You need what? We're not buying robots here or whatever it is. It's extreme correlation, extreme rule testing, or whatever you want to call it. It has to evolve. I mean, the bad guys are getting better, and we no longer have the capability to keep hiring the number of analysts that it would take to do the gray matter thinking and assessment. And also, they can't do the volume or even the correct analysis. AI,
spot on.
Big data analysis shows that they, trained correctly, they will be more accurate than a human in 95% of the cases. So I don't think we can, there's no avoiding it. It's just what is hard is that there's so much unknown about it. Is it's with your limited security budget, technology budget, how much am I going to invest in this? Yep. Right? Do I keep banging two rocks together? Do I try and buy the spaceship and see what it can do? And it's scary for many CISOs. I know it's been scary for me.
Thanks, Jim. And I just wanted to go back to I got it. So understanding that the difference between ML and AI is that machine learning is coded in Python and artificial intelligence is coded in PowerPoint, because AI really doesn't exist. And a lot of people try to say it does, but AI is just simply nested Python. And it's those things that we use to gain those insights at a deep, deep level, as you mentioned. And I think that we're going to continue to improve on that. And there's no way that we could automate and keep up with the bad guys any other way than automation and machine learning. So I think it's necessary across every product set that we have. And I think that we need to continue to embrace it. But the hype and the acronyms tend to get out of control sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I know we've got 10 minutes or so. Just jump into just as a very short maybe subject here is we see people flip-flopping here quite a bit. There's a lot, trends where companies are using MSSPs or a white glove service, and they're being alerted by them. They're assuming someone's watching my network, and that works 50% of the time. That's there. But we're also seeing is a lot of people bringing those SOC services back in-house. What are your thoughts on one or the other?
I think you do need to have some paid services. Okay. Not necessarily outsourcing it all, but have sources that can tell you about threat intelligence. And if you don't have threat hunting capabilities, make sure you have those. So leverage the vendors and the tools and the platforms, but have that expertise, because no one else is going to know. Maybe the hackers, but no other vendor is going to know your network as you do.
Yes,
right?
Correct.
So that is going to be really, really key if you're in a breach or post-breach situation. Knowing your assets, whether it's critical or not, right? I mean, obviously, it goes without saying, you better know your critical assets, right?
Yeah.
You better have a baseline associated with those at a minimum.
Correct.
And do your threat hunting and leverage the threat intelligence and learn from every single attack out there, right? Yeah, every time you hear about a breach or an attack somewhere, it doesn't have to be within the United States, anywhere in the world, right? Learn from it, use your threat intel team to do research on it, and compare against your security controls and the efficacy of them. See if you're vulnerable, right? In some cases, you may have mitigating controls. If you have a hole, then try to fill it, right? And use some of those control gaps. I mean, you may not be able to get the funding right away. Use those control gaps, assess the risk, and if it is not too risky, then bundle that with something else that is coming in, or look at a vendor that gives you capabilities on both or something like that, right? Mm-hmm. So, the threat hunting and threat intelligence is really, really key, I think.
Yeah, great point.
And, I'm going to take this from a different angle, which is the first is, I've done it both ways for, in-house and balanced and completely outsourced. And I think a lot of it comes down to your organization. Some organizations, it's a lot easier to have a non-labor OpEx line item that sits out there that gets charged against the budget, as opposed to those, expensive employees that go up and down and have benefits and requirements that, senior leadership, especially if you're in an OpEx focused organization, will look at as a way to reduce expense, right? So that might be one way to short up. The other is that if your organization isn't able to spend a percentage, whatever that number is, 20 to 50% additional on the people in-house, then it's probably not worth having them in-house, because they've got to stay clean. They've got to go experience new stuff. They've got to go to Black Hat, participate in CPS, whatever it is, or stuff, or they're not going to be able to keep up. right? You can't just hire a security analyst, stick him at the desk and go, okay, for the next year, you're just going to do this. If they don't get some experience outside of their hidey hole, you're going to suffer. So your MSP is probably the way to go. But I really think it comes down to what your organization can support.
Absolutely. And I've always been an advocate for a hybrid model. You need to have a core team, as Shahir said, that understands your network and your regulatory compliance issues, depending on how stringent your requirements are. But the scalability that you get from a third party is so important. And that 24/7 scalability with no skills gap that you have to overcome. The folks in our industry are in such high demand that by the time you get them onboarded, up to speed, trained in, and part of the team, they're getting 10 offers a week to go somewhere else. That number came to me about 2 months ago from a resource in the recruiting field. People in this industry are getting 10 offers a week. So that's difficult to overcome when you have a turnover. And so that's also a cultural hit too, because the folks on the team that stay there, take that culture hit. And so I'm a huge proponent of hybrid models where you have the folks, as Shahir said, in threat intelligence, threat hunting, pen testing, and 24/7 SOC that can be part of a MSSP team.
Yeah, great. Yeah, it truly is. The hybrid model does work. And so here, great point. You have to know your network, have to know your own network at the end of the day. Nobody knows it better than you do, right? So, lot of great discussions. What are your thoughts on a final topic here? What are your thoughts on how to better plan for the future? Just some parting words. Jim, that is pretty much, that's what that emoji was created for.
Exactly. I guess I'll just jump in there and say, it's all about balance, right? Troy just said hybrid model, right? Don't throw all your money at the AI, or I'm sorry, the expensive nested Python code. Balance it. You've got to have strong response, strong human resources, good technology, all wrapped into one. And as Shahir said at the beginning, stick with the fundamentals, right? You hit the ball, you run the bases, you catch the ball. If you don't have your anti-malware, good response process, and good authorization, you're going to get hit. So start with the fundamentals.
Yeah, great.
I would just like to add to that. Believe it or not, cybersecurity is all about relationships. This is a relationship position. You have to have relationships with your user base, relationships with your board, relationships with your CEO and CFO, relationships with your team, relationships with your third party. You have to basically manage those relationships so that you can come together and have this work. I've seen so many companies where it's a very closed door activity. Security is behind some black door that nobody understands, and it never works. You have to build those bridges to the business and make sure that you are building those relationships. And then, of course, you have to do the basic block and tackling, asset management, vulnerability management, endpoint protection, firewalls, cloud, multi-cloud. I mean, there's so many different silos of things you need to focus on. But if you get the team in place and those relationships right, you'll have a lot easier journey, and you'll have people along with you that want to see you succeed.
Yep, great point. Yeah, well, relationships are important, right? Having a good relationship with your security vendors is important. Shahir?
I think Jim and Roy already covered many of the good points. I'll just say, don't forget about the human firewall concept.
Yes.
You can have all kinds of controls, but if your associates or employees are not aware and do something very simple or stupid, you could easily get into a bad situation, especially when you're dealing with IoTs and everything is connected to everything, right? It's very easy for vulnerability to be exploited by malware or ransomware for them to get in, right? Your threat surface is so big nowadays. So concept of human firewall, goes a long way. People think about the people, process, and technology, right? It's not just about the technology. You have to think about the people and have an effective process to operationalize all of these controls that you have implemented.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, thank you all very much for sharing all of your thoughts on some of the the technologies, the processes, and things like that. The last thing I want to leave with is a question outside of technology, right? Just based on, I think we all have dated ourselves pretty well here. We've all been doing this for 25, 30 years. So part of this webinar was for us to share and be thought leaders, but partly we want to help with your career. Make sure you are successful on your journey. How have you helped your team or yourself effectively raise your success within your business? Panelists, can you give our audience on what was effective for you to advance your career? What can our audience do to advance their careers? And we're going to end with that.
Sure, and Snehal, thank you for your time today. I'll end with that, with this, and just say there's so many great questions in the chat. I really wanted to get to some of them. Apologies if we didn't get to them. There's some great questions there. Hopefully, we'll be able to follow up in writing. But for me, believe it or not, networking really helped propel my career, and getting to know folks across the aisle, so to speak, when it came to not just focusing on security, but also in technology from the vendor side as well as the end user side. Staying in touch with venture capitalists is big for me to understand what new startups are coming out with technology. I love to see the startup scene and see what people are coming up with to attack these problems with solutions, and really building those bridges across those gaps as well. It's all about being a people person, and don't be afraid to network. Join a local networking team, meet with folks in your city that have similar interests, and you'll realize very quickly that opportunities will start coming your way because of who you know.
Excellent. Great point. Shahir?
Internally, I think Troy touched on many of the same topics I was going to say, but visibility creates accountability. So it's not, it's not just important that you meet with your board, you meet with your senior leaders, and give them, visibility into the security posture, right? Mm-hmm. In some cases, you may have multiple business units. One may be better than the other, but visibility creates accountability. That is also your chance to raise key risks and show them, and don't just go there and raise issues to them, right?
Yeah.
Go to them with solutions.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, you're not going to survive,
yep,
right?
Absolutely.
Go to them with solutions, right? These are the 2 ways or 3 different ways we can solve for this, and this is and give them a roadmap, right? This is how fast you could get there, or you can give them a tactical, medium term and a strategic approach, and that's one of the ways you can sell, security to the business, giving them that roadmap of this is how much reduction that you're going to get, right? These are your capabilities, and these are your vulnerabilities or risks, and this is how you can address them, right? Networking is key. Sometimes it's all about, especially in containment and response, you have to know your business, right? It's knowing who can solve that specific problem for you quickly. Time is of essence when it comes to breaches.
Great. Great points. Great points, Shahir. Thank you. Jim?
Yeah, I guess I'd walk away with 2 R's, which is relationships, along with Troy. You've got to have them.
Absolutely.
At all levels. You got to be able to talk to them. If you're not having, a quarterly, monthly, weekly one-on-one with your stakeholders, then do it. Even if you're an analyst, you should have a one-on-one with the help desk manager and one-on-one with the network guy and whatever. You need to create those relationships. They will serve you well at every level of your career. The second one is that you got to become risk-based. Everything you do should be every conversation you have with a business leader or an IT guy is all about risk. It's not yes or no. It's not black or white. It's, okay, that's interesting. Here's how I see the risk. Do you want to accept that, or can we try and mitigate it? And then, as I think Shahir said, come with the solution in mind, right? When they do that. And then the third one is, take a PowerPoint class, for the love of God, right? I mean, you got to learn how to present, get up there. Don't be afraid to reach out to somebody on LinkedIn who's a good presenter and ask them how they learned to do what they do and take some tips. how you communicate is almost as important, if not more important, than what you communicate. You know, they say that most people will never remember what you said, but they'll remember how you made them feel, right? So that's a huge thing, knowing how to communicate and get that feeling, that limbic brain, you know, understanding the message you're trying to send across.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great points, everyone. And at the end of the day, you also got to have fun, right? So I had a lot of fun doing this today. It made it very, very enjoyable. I learned a great deal today. Troy, Shahir, Jim, thank you very much. Dan, thank you very much for hosting this, and hope to do this again very, very soon.